They didn't say that. Okay, that's fine. I don't know about that. Can I sit over there? All right. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to be in the Capitol on a Friday morning and looking forward to chairing the Labor Committee, where we're going to be hearing the bill on lifting the mining moratorium. And I really just wanted to say that and say that I intend to have a fair hearing and allow everyone a chance to speak. And with that, I'll turn it over to Representative Rob Hutton.
Well, thank you and good morning, and thank you to Representative Culp and Chairman Culp for holding this open hearing in the Labor Committee this morning. I think it will be a great discussion around the future and legacy of mining in Wisconsin and why this is such an important piece of legislation, not only for northern Wisconsin, but for the entire state. I just want to say thank you to Senator Tiffany for his leadership in bringing this bill about and getting us to where we are today, and the collaborative effort across the board with a number of stakeholders that have spoken into this piece of legislation. I think we as legislators have to look at us and say, what is a real objective that we have for being in the political spectrum? And certainly I would think one of those is to continue to look at areas where we are stifling economic development with unreasonable regulation that needs to be reformed and looked into. And I think this bill strikes a perfect balance for needed economic reform and economic opportunity, and reforming and mitigating regulatory environments that, quite frankly, don't have the intended purpose for which they were originally implemented. And the number of stakeholders on both sides of this, from those interested in mining to those interested in the environment, have been at the table speaking into this piece of legislation, and I think through that process have made it an even better piece of legislation. I found it interesting that as I watched the news last night that the CBS News Network in Milwaukee, Channel 58, is going to begin airing a segment called Disappearing Towns. And it is about the plight of small towns in Wisconsin, specifically northern Wisconsin, that continue to struggle sustaining their local municipalities and their, in this case, townships, because of the lack of economic opportunity. I think that timing is not coincidental because as we visited northern Wisconsin, we've seen the lack of economic opportunity. This bill speaks into what we can do to resource new opportunities for good family-sustaining jobs in a really productive industry of mining. We've spent the last several months being very encouraged about the developments with Foxconn in southeast Wisconsin, something I think we all should be very encouraged and be rewarding and speaking highly into in terms of the transformation that's going to provide to Wisconsin. When I look at opportunities for Foxconn in southeast Wisconsin, I ask where are those opportunities in northern Wisconsin? And when I look at the legacy of mining and how well mining is being done today and the opportunity simply to engage those in the mining industry to say, why not mining in Wisconsin? This legislation simply creates the platform with support from the DNR to begin that permitting process by removing a moratorium that was put back in place in 1998 that, however well intended, has not served the purpose for not only protecting the environment but providing economic opportunity for those that desperately need it in Wisconsin. So we look forward to a good public hearing today. We think there's going to be a lot of good comments and questions from both sides, and we look forward to that opportunity. And with that, I will turn it over to Senator Tiffany.
Great. Thanks. Great to be here today, and I want to thank Representative Hutton for his remarks. Remarks are spot on. Thank you to Representative Culp for chairing this committee today to be able to hear what's really an important bill here, not just for the state of Wisconsin, but for the United States. We didn't name this bill Mining for America by accident. This is about global leadership by the United States of America. I think we heard loud and clear in 2016, people want to make things once again in America, and you can't make things without those raw materials. I want to thank our staff members. If you look at these boards here, it really speaks to how we use minerals in our everyday life. And we see countries like over in Africa that employ people in the mining industry that are 8 years old. You look at the Human Rights Watch website, they document how underage children, very young children in some instances, are being forced to work in mines. We see, in particular in Southeast Asia, not nearly the environmental protections that we have here in the United States, and especially here in Wisconsin. I believe we do have some ethical duty to produce some of those raw materials, some of those minerals right here in the United States and in Wisconsin to produce those things we use in our everyday lives. I mean, look at them. So this bill really does two primary things. One, it ends the mining moratorium that's been in place for almost 20 years. We've heard in the testimony in the Senate and Ladysmith that DNR secretaries, both past and present, are saying that it does not bring value to the mining process. The second thing that it does is it eliminates the irrevocable trust agreement, which was put in administrative rule almost 20 years ago. And the thing that we heard as we were drafting this bill is that the irrevocable trust was on shaky legal ground, hearing that from legislative counsel. And so we said, if that is not going to hold up in the law, then we need to change it. Now, we proposed removing it in the original version of the budget. With the amendments that we passed in the Senate last week, there are two additional forms of financial assurance that are going to replace that irrevocable trust agreement. There are four pieces now in the Senate version of the budget as it's amended. There are four pieces of financial assurance that are put in place to protect you and I, to protect the public's interest here. And so very important. The most important thing, though, that Representative Hutton cited here is brought a document along. I hope you'll all take a look at it. This comes from the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance. I just picked it up off my desk a couple days ago, and there's a map in here showing what Wisconsin looks like in terms of economic development. Take a look at the very far north. We are getting older and poorer in northern Wisconsin. We have areas of the state that really are having robust growth. And we're going to see even more robust growth, especially in southeastern Wisconsin. And it will benefit other parts of the state, but it'll primarily be centered in southern and southeastern Wisconsin. This is a comparative advantage that we have in Wisconsin. This greenstone belt that lies on Highway 8 from Ladysmith over to Michigan, north of Highway 29, it's centered in the far north. That is a comparative advantage we have not only in our state, that nowhere else in our state has, but there's very few places around the world that have something like this, what could be a multi-billion-dollar industry, to provide all these things that we use in our daily lives. It's a great opportunity. I think about, as we went through school funding with in the budget process, and I have a daughter that left, she's off to college a couple years ago. I have 2 kids that are in school yet, K-12. And you look at the enrollments into schools in far northern Wisconsin. My kids go to the Lakeland Union High School district in Minocqua. They had 1,000 kids in their high school 10 years ago. They're now down to 700 kids. Antigo, the same story. Many other small communities, you're seeing significant declines in their enrollment. Now, not all of it's due to, shall we say, economic decline. There's a variety of factors, but one of them is that we don't have some of the economic opportunities that that other parts of the state have. This is one of the great opportunities we have. And I think about a young man who's a year older than my oldest daughter. He's over at the Milwaukee School of Engineering. He grew up in a logging family. He's a very smart young man. He's going to end up being an engineer. He's going to end up making, very shortly after graduation, over $100,000 a year. We have very little opportunity to bring a bright young man who's probably going to have a family at some point back home to northern Wisconsin. This offers that opportunity for someone like him who's going to command a $100,000 a year salary or higher. This provides that opportunity that we're going to be able to bring some of these kids home, and that they're going to be able to stay in northern Wisconsin and have great opportunities. And mining can do that. We can do it safely. We can do it responsibly. So with that, we'd be happy to take any questions.
Senator, there's already been some tribal opposition to this. I think we're going to hear more today. What is your response to the tribes who are in northern Wisconsin and live there a long time?
Yeah, it's going to be done safely and responsibly. And I would say one of the amendments that we put in the bill in regards to replacing the irrevocable trust agreement, that provides a financial assurance. And it's not just a bond, it provides a financial assurance that it will be set aside with the state of Wisconsin for up to 250 years. What our tribal members in northern Wisconsin, I have a number of tribes in my district, what they say to us, think about the next 7 generations. Think about the next 7 generations. That's why we wrote that for 250 years. I would also say, if I may, I hope people go back and look at the testimony of Leona Awaquat, which I hope I pronounced her last name correctly, who came down, an indigenous person from northern Canada, lives north of the Arctic Circle, testified in Ladysmith, and she cited how we, in the last 20 years, have went in the opposite direction of Wisconsin. While you've had a moratorium stopping mining, we've opened 3 mines in northern Canada. We went from a 68% unemployment rate in our tribe down to 7%. We have $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year jobs now being provided for our people. I thought it was a powerful testimony.
Other questions?
Are there any environmental groups that are in support of this legislation?
We've worked really closely with the Federation for Wildlife here in Wisconsin that has been on the front lines. George Meyer, who is the director there, spoke into this legislation early and often. The amendments that you will hear talked about in the public hearing today came out of real in-depth discussion with George Meyer, who, for those of you that don't know, the former DNR secretary, that didn't come out to support the bill, came out to support the concept of mining and wanted to ensure that this bill addressed all the concerns that they would have. So you will hear not only with the long-term financial mitigation concern, but also some of the environmental concerns, bulk sanding being one of those, that comes out of some in-depth discussion and a collaborative effort to make sure that they were as comfortable as possible. And you will hear a statement from him today in his testimony speaking to that.
Yeah, if I could follow up on that a little bit. Really reached out to a number of groups, some that chose not to. Now, there are some environmental groups that have made it very clear the mining moratorium should not go away. So did we go consult with them? No, because they believe that the moratorium is appropriate. They do not believe. I mean, that's basically an anti-mining position in Wisconsin. You don't want mining here in the state. But for those groups that are willing to talk to us, we had very good discussions with Ducks Unlimited. We went to Trout Unlimited. Trout Unlimited chose not to support the bill. They are opposed to it, but we clued them in on the process as we went through it. Talked to Ducks Unlimited. We met with the Wetlands Association. Now, the Wetlands Association is opposed to this bill, but they were appreciative that we brought them into the process, and we really had good, robust discussions in regards to this. And I thought the Wildlife Federation, they came forth in the Lady Smith hearing, and they said, we have three things that we believe need to be fixed. We sat down and worked with them extensively. And in all candor, the leadership of the Wildlife Federation very much leaned on Larry Lynch, who was with the Department of Natural Resources in their mining, handled mining issues for them. And we had a number of meetings that included Larry Lynch, both when he was with the Department of Natural Resources and since he has retired. And one of the things that he was very insistent upon, he believed there needed to be a replacement for that irrevocable trust agreement. He believed that us leaving it out of the bill left some vulnerability for the people of the state of Wisconsin. And we sat down and created an alternative to that, which is the contingency bond and the preventative maintenance fund that were passed in amendments in the Senate last week.
You mentioned you work with the DNR. Could you speak more about their role in crafting this bill? Or is that the only person?
Yeah, so we sat down and included the Department of Natural Resources when we did our initial drafting. They were not there, but we worked our way through the process. And when we thought we were at a good place with the bill and that we were getting close to the end, we sat down and met with the Department of Natural Resources, Pat Stevens and his crew in his division. And we've been in touch with them since and have had good discussions with them and made sure we worked with them in terms of the legislative intent that we have.
Yep. Pat Stevens was there to testify with his staff at the public hearing in Lady Smith. For the Senate public hearing, we believe he'll be here this morning as well to do the same. We'll simply testify for informational purposes, but I think we'll speak into how involved they were in this legislation.
The mining law was changed for Gogebic, or in interest of the Gogebic project a couple years ago, and they ended up pulling out. If these changes are made, is there any indication that the company's actually going to be able to, I guess, bring a project to fruition in the state?
Go ahead and speak into it.
So for those of you who didn't hear, in regards to the Gogebic project that did not get to fruition, by the way, I do believe that deposit's going to be mined at some point in the future. It's one of the most valuable iron ore deposits that's left in North America. I believe that will happen at some point in time. We really took a different approach to this, and it's part of the reason that we separated the ferrous process versus non-ferrous when we did the iron mining bill. It uses a mechanical process to separate the ore from the rock. This is non-ferrous mining. You're using harsh chemicals to do this. So we thought it deserved a different process, and that's reflected here. And in fact, if you look at this bill, there's portions of the Cullen-Schultz bill that they put forth as an alternative during the iron mining process. There's parts of that bill, we went back and studied very closely. There's components that are included in this bill. For example, the requirement that the Department of Natural Resources work with the federal agencies like the Army Corps of Engineers. There's a requirement for them to work with them in this bill that we did not include in the iron mining bill. There's a few things like that we took out of the Cullen-Schultz bill and we included in this bill.
So maybe a follow-up.
Does that answer your
follow-up
question?
Who's ready to dig?
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't answer the question, did I? I believe that there are exploration companies that are prepared to come to Wisconsin. Don't have any immediately that I can say for sure that they're going to do that. But I mean, when you look at companies like Highland Copper, Aquila, others that have been operating over in Michigan, I would think that they would have an interest. And there's not been a lot of exploratory mining for non-ferrous since the 1980s. So I think there certainly would be some pent-up demand. But the message is very clear. They said with the mining moratorium in place, they're not coming to Wisconsin. I believe that you'll see exploration very soon after, if this bill passes.
And I think, too, it's important to realize there's nothing in this legislation in any type of incentives for any mining companies to come. There's no tax credits. There's no incentives at all. This legislation is simply opening the window for those mining companies who would otherwise be interested in coming to do some initial exploration. Similar to what they're already doing, as Senator Tiffany alluded to, in Michigan, in Minnesota. We are simply saying we have the resources those two states have. We ought to be attracting that same type of development here.
What do you say to people who are worried about beautiful Wisconsin and tourism? The tourism industry attracts a lot of people, and I don't know if this goes hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe there's room for all. It's a big state. We can do all these things, and we can do them safely without intruding on each other. I mean, I was in the tourism business, tourism, recreation, owned a dinner and excursion boat for 20 years, and one of the most beautiful parts of the state on the Willow Flowage. And I know that we can do this safely. In fact, I would say to you, the two go hand in hand. The more that we have good economic development in the state of Wisconsin, the more money that we can put towards these programs that help protect the environment. Think about the $3 billion deficit that we inherited when we came in after the 2010 elections in 2011. Immediately, austerity measures had to be put in place. What happened to the Stewardship Fund? The Stewardship Fund peaked at, about $86 million in about a decade ago. And it was steadily pared down after that because we did not have the funds to make sure that we could fund that program. This is how you fund good, environmentally sound programs, is by having robust industry, by people having jobs, by being taxpayers. That's how both of them go hand in hand. I mean, I see this regularly in the media. The environment versus the economy. That is not the case. It's the environment and the economy can work together.
Coincidentally enough, for those of you that had not been up there, and as of last month, I had not been up to Ladysmith to see the Flambeau mine. And yet today, 20 years post that mine closing, there is talk that that mine, if you go to there today, it's as pristine as you can possibly imagine, with 5 miles of walking trails right on the Flambeau River. There is talk today about, with support from the mining company, by the way, of turning that into a campsite that would allow campers and vacationers, tourists to come up and not only camp on the site, but to access the Flambeau River with recreation. I mean, if there isn't an irony, I don't know what one is, in terms of a former mine actually serving as a location for tourists to come and enjoy the beautiful pristine of Wisconsin.
By the way, the Flambeau mine was the biggest attraction in Rusk County when it was in operation. People naturally would have an interest in that, and so.
Any last questions? We'll wrap it up. Terrific.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Jesse.